It's difficult sometimes for some people to even come out and admit that they're mentally ill.
My daughter was, maybe 6 months old when she first started exhibiting rage. At 6 months old, if the bottle fell out of her mouth, she would stiffen.
Deep scars, and it ain't no superficial. That meant that Domingo wanted to end his life back then when he wasn't wanted by so-called society.
When my son was originally diagnosed, he had just been released from the Marines.
I ended up in a psychiatric hospital after 2 years of really hitting my bottom, losing my house, losing my child.
And then I go through depressions where I just don't want to do anything. I want to stay in bed. I don't care even if my fiance is over. I don't care if the President of the United States is over. I just want to stay in bed.
The whole clubhouse not only gave my daughter hope and changed her life, but it saved my daughter's life.
We can achieve all the same things as anyone else. We're no different than anyone else.
I used to say that mental illness destroyed my life, and I lived that way for many years. Now I see it as a positive.
This series is supported by Northern Trust, providing investment, trust, and estate services. Online at northerntrust.com.
My daughter was, maybe 6 months old when she first started exhibiting rage. At 6 months old, if the bottle fell out of her mouth, she would stiffen into a rage. Normally, children, if you put the bottle back in their mouths, they're fine. Not her. I would have to hold her. I would have to cuddle her. I would have to get her soothed and then give her the bottle before she would settle down. And the doctors then, at the age of 5, particularly after she expressed her thoughts that she wanted to die at the age of 5. But they went beyond the usual thoughts, I want to die. They were thoughts that I want to step in front of a truck. And I want to die. It was then that they first began to say, well, maybe bipolar, maybe ODD. They used a lot of the alphabet. Oppositional defiant disorder, attention deficit disorder, ADHD with the hyperactivity. When she was younger and littler, I would actually have to hold her and go sit in the closet with her where there was darker and no stimulation, and just hold her and talk to her until she calmed down. And that lasted until she was about 13. At age 13, she had her first major psychotic break. I hired a psychologist from Dunedin, Florida, to come and observe her. He spent about 10 hours observing her at home, reading reports, reading other evaluations to tell me what was going on with my daughter. He began to suggest that in the future, possibly other diagnoses had to be looked at. Whatever treatment they used didn't work because she spent her 18th birthday at South Seminole Hospital. They had to Baker Act her because she tried to commit suicide from there at the facility. By 2009, she was averaging a crisis center admission every 3 weeks. Every 3 weeks. But it was in 2009 also that her new psychiatrist in Naples had revised the diagnosis from bipolar to borderline personality disorder. But I did a little bit more research. I found out that there was a seminar that was being held in St. Petersburg. And so in early November of 2009, I took the day off and went to that seminar. There I learned that borderline personality disorder, a person can recover from the disease. With the right treatment, people can actually recover. Because it was the first time in all her life that anyone had actually given me hope. So I talked to them. I found out during the seminar that there were no one trained in Southwest Florida to treat her symptoms. And her symptom, dialectical behavior therapy is the treatment of choice for borderline personality disorder. In November of 2009, we began to drive to the support group in Boca. And we've been driving every Saturday since then. My daughter, I think, was so eager to find something that helped that from the time she started that treatment to today, she hasn't been admitted once. She's had no crisis. She hasn't cut herself. She hasn't tried to commit suicide. She has had absolutely no negative incidents. She's working. She's driving. She's actually having somewhat of a social life now. I mean, she's actually beginning to live. And you know, after years and years of mental illness, so many people just give up. They don't care. It's just they have this feeling that nothing is ever going to work. But she bought into it, almost desperately. I think she was desperate for something to help her feel better. And I think without that, nothing I could have done. I mean, I found the things, but nothing I could have done could have made that treatment work without her desire.
I'm a peer specialist. This is what I do for a living. I'm a peer specialist, and I work for NAMI at the David Lawrence Center in Naples, Florida. A peer specialist is someone who works right there on the floor in the CSU, the Crisis Stabilization Unit, with the people that are going through an episode. Some people are there for substance abuse. Some people are there that have a disorder like bipolar disorder, like that. That's what I have. I was diagnosed when I was 26 years old, and I'm 24 years ago. I'm 50 years old now. I didn't understand what was happening to me the first time it happened, the first time I had an episode. And 6 months later, I had a full-blown episode. But I was just traveling down the Pennsylvania Turnpike one night, and I had some thoughts that I thought I put together some sort of a understanding of an embezzlement going on at my company. And it wasn't, I called my father that night, and it wasn't true whatsoever, you know. I thought that there was a bomb at my front door. September 4th, 1987 changed my life. For the first time, I realized that there's a detour in my life, that things weren't going to be the same from there on. For the first time, you know, your mind that you've trusted your whole life, and your brain that you've relied on your whole life, for the first time is playing tricks on you. And it was very disconcerting. The stigma is going away. I think that's a good point. It's difficult sometimes for some people to even come out and admit that they're mentally ill. But I think now that it's becoming more prevalent and more in the public eye, so much more, that people are starting to understand. When you have bipolar disorder, you have it for the rest of your life, and you're probably going to be needing to address it in terms of recovery for the rest of your life. Most people are on medicines that they need to stay on. And this, as a matter of fact, one of the worst breaches that occurs a lot these days is people stop taking their medicine after they start feeling well. Since I've been healthy the last 10 years, it's been easier to be an advocate and to be public about it.
When my son was originally diagnosed, he had just been released from the Marines, and they let him go on a bad conduct discharge because he had left during basic training and did not return. And I didn't know when I got him back home what he was going through. And he was just not acting right. He was telling me that the FBI was looking for him and that There were bombs that were planted on the roof of our house. My son was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is schizophrenia with mood disorders of highs and lows. And there's been times I was afraid and I didn't know what to do with him. He could not live very well on his own. I would get phone calls. He had been arrested multiple times, and it seemed like no one was able to help me. I was not getting any advice on where to go for support. And eventually, I found NAMI online and contacted them, and they helped to guide me through the system. One of the hardest times is when you know that they are sliding off their meds and there's no one you can turn to at that point in time. He's not a threat to himself or someone else yet, but he's totally psychotic and could get in trouble with the law, could harm himself, possibly someone else, and there's nothing you can do at that point until you can prove that they are a threat to themselves and someone else. You can try to call and ask for a CIT officer, which is a crisis intervention trained officer. They will come, they have the experience to de-escalate a situation.
When I was 24, I had a real nervous breakdown. And what happened was I started to hallucinate. And my hallucinations got me to a point that I became a paranoid schizophrenic. And back then, friends, family, they didn't understand what was going on with me until I got diagnosed first with depression, then the paranoid schizophrenic. And of course, I was doing 2 treatments, giving me, I don't know how to say it, they get medicines and all that to keep me in under treatment. I also went under detox. Some medications really did harm on my system. So to make the story short, I ended up being in Florida here. My sister found me in Connecticut and came down here and been living here 21 years in Florida and lived 20 years in Connecticut. And in the process of all that, 30 years I've been dealing with my mental illness. This is deep scars, and it ain't no superficial. That meant that Domingo wanted to end his life back then when he wasn't wanted by so-called society, when they don't want you or you have some kind of a mental health. So, but Domingo through that process learned that in those years, this recovery, the organizations out there like NAMI, a lot of organizations that they can also provide some help. And I found help in NAMI, and NAMI has been good to me. And I'm open because there's a lot of issues, especially in a lot of communities, especially like I'm representing today the Spanish community. Yo hablo español, so para las personas que escuchan o entienden el idioma en español, quiero hablarle a ustedes, decirle que la enfermedad mental se puede curar. In other words, the mental health can be taken care and recovery can work.
I used to say that mental illness destroyed my life, and I lived that way for many years. Now I see it as a positive because it has completely changed the course of my life and made me a more compassionate person. So I'm actually in some ways thankful for it on Sundays, and then the days I wake up depressed or anxious, I would take that back. After I got diagnosed with depression at a walk-in clinic, I was on a series of medications, and eventually we found out later that they were the wrong medications. So I became extremely paranoid to the point where I was trying to jump on trains, and I would walk around Walmart for 3 hours thinking someone was guiding me over the system overhead. And so finally I I admitted to a doctor that I wanted to die, and I ended up in a state mental hospital. When I was court ordered to go to the state mental hospital, it is required that you are handcuffed and put in feet shackles and connected. And I was 18, I mean, I was barely an adult. And the only crime that I had committed was that I was so sad that I wanted to die. But yet I was in all these chains, and I thought going to the mental hospital, the state mental hospital, that I would get better, that they would fix me. And instead, it was a really actually traumatic experience for me. And I ended up in the hospital 9 times after that before I finally figured out how to not go back. For a long time, I had been told that if you just take your medication, that you'll be fine. And I had been doing that for 8 years, but I was still going in and out of the hospital. And it wasn't until I realized that I had to take some of that personal responsibility back in my own life. Little things like using my alarm clock to wake up, or fixing my own food, or opening my own mail. Those are things that I had given up because, I was so sick, and sick enough that I had to be on disability, and, I had a mental illness. So I let all those responsibilities go. And when I started taking that personal responsibility back, making my own choices, is when I really started to see recovery in my own life. And when that started, when I got that little bit of hope back, it was almost like nothing could stop me.
At the age of 23, I was diagnosed with bipolar and generalized anxiety disorder. So for the age of 23, that was probably back in the early 80s. They originally put me on lithium and Xanax. And way back then, I think Xanax was relatively new because they put me on a dose of like 1.0 milligrams 3 times a day. And I was told definitely not to drink. By that age, I was already an alcoholic. And having gone through some courses here in Lee County offered by NAMI, I've learned that 70% of people with mental illnesses also suffer from substance abuse. I ended up in a psychiatric hospital after 2 years of really hitting my bottom, losing my house, losing my child for I had refinanced my house for $100,000. I had a Toyota Camry XLE that I loved that was paid for. And I got involved with a guy that was like 18 years my junior. And I got addicted to crack cocaine. And I lost everything. I think the best way sometimes to help in recovery, I know the best way is through talking to other people that suffer the same thing that you do is one of the best ways to move on in your recovery.
Well, our journey started about 3 years ago. And it started with our daughter going off to college. And while she was away at college, mental illness roared into her life like a lion. And this was something that, of course, mental illness not only affected her, but it affected our entire family. We started a quest to help our daughter and get her the best therapists, the best doctors, but in doing so, Jordan just kept spiraling down, and it was devastating for us because she was a champion dancer. She had Irish dancer, and she had traveled the world entertaining, performing for others, and all that was, totally cut short. What I'd like to say is what really made my daughter's recovery successful, and I have to say this, is the Hope Clubhouse. And the Hope Clubhouse not only gave my daughter hope and changed her life, but it saved my daughter's life.
Hope is an important word for people that feel destitute and feel like there's no answer to these problems.
Kyle's in the snack bar with Josh.
Okay, we're going to keep your spirits up, okay? Try to focus on your job today. Recovery through work. Recovery through work. Hope Clubhouse is a psychiatric rehab program for people living with mental illnesses. Their treatment and their medications, and they see their doctor. We fill a gap for them where we can be supportive, we can be friends, we can talk, and we treat them and look at their strengths and their abilities and not their illness. Many of the members had careers and have worked in a profession that have just gotten stricken with this illness and are striving to get their life back.
I came to the Hope Clubhouse by referral from my doctor about a year and a half ago. I was suicidal at the time. I slept with a loaded .380 handgun by my bed at all times, so if I woke up in the morning and I didn't want to carry on, I had my off switch. Asperger's, high-level functioning autism, bipolar, there's OCD, extreme depression, suicidal tendencies, ADHD. There's, goodness, I'm trying to remember all of them. There's a few more, but I try not to focus on them too much. When I came in, I had this vision in my mind of it being like underwater basket weavers and people with like adult daycare, and it wasn't that at all.
We give them jobs at the clubhouse, whether it be running the culinary unit or the business unit or answering the phones or working in our banking unit. And they are doing meaningful work and helping us run the operations of the clubhouse.
I showed up and they said, well, we need somebody who can do websites. I'm like, well, I'm a computer engineer. I can do websites, build your network, all that stuff. I'm volunteering here.
Some people come in and want to build up their self-confidence and want to get a job again. We open up at 9 o'clock like any other work environment.
I get in, I sign in, I join the morning meeting.
Yeah, she wants to do clerical. And then Dewey wants to cook.
The members choose what they want to do for the day.
Let's get to work.
And everybody goes to their stations and work, and we work as a team. They're not separate from the staff. They are the clubhouse.
I'm a receptionist. I bounce back and forth in the kitchen. I do clerical work with Rebecca. I live with bipolar, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. My journey out of darkness is a little rough. When was that last week? I actually tried to commit suicide and I almost, the doctor said it was a miracle I survived. So change that ticket. Today's the 20th. I really wanted to have friends because I really had never had any friends. So that was my main focus. Yes. And I have really good friends here now.
And there's a lot of bad things that have happened in my life. When I came to the clubhouse, things changed for me. Learning to cope with it, the clubhouse is more than just a support group, more than just a family. It's opened up a lot of opportunities for me, doors for me. At the same time, I'm not treated like someone who is, mentally ill or anything like that. I'm treated as an individual. They don't see the mental illness.
You're doing good. Okay. It's a big challenge when you can't manage your emotions or your thinking is not as clear as you would like it to be. So they have to be very strong.
I feel more courageous, empowered, more of a self-hero.
I think that a community that does not have a clubhouse sees more people in crisis. Hope was a very obvious word that is needed by people who are living with mental illness that feel that there's no answer and that their life is not worth living, that we want to give them hope and we want to give them a desire to get back out there and get their lives back.
I'm going to need you to help me. We're going to print out a lot of the invitations for the open house, and then I'm going to need you to help me with folding and stuffing.
Okay.
Okay, Brad is coming today too?
I've learned that I'm not defined by my illness and that I'm loving, caring, unique, special, and I'm beautiful.